This past weekend, three separate stories broke about Peter Obi's political movement, and when you put them together, they tell a story that neither the presidency nor the Obidient Movement itself wants Nigerians to see clearly. On Friday, July 17, President Tinubu's special advisor on policy communication, Daniel Bwala, posted something on X that immediately went viral. He said, and I am giving you his exact words, "There is a silent political civil war going on in the Obidient camp." He said members of the movement are beginning to realize it is not a political movement, but, in his words, a hate, vitriol, and unpatriotic movement. He said supporters are quietly abandoning it. That same weekend, a completely different story broke. Isaac Fayose, the younger brother of former Ekiti State Governor Ayodele Fayose, publicly threatened to withdraw his support for Peter Obi. Why? Because a video went viral showing him praying with Seyi Tinubu, the president's own son. Fayose defended himself by saying his support for Obi was never a permanent commitment. And then, just yesterday, July 18, Bwala went further. He accused Obi directly of using repeated claims about threats to his life as a deliberate political strategy to mobilize the Obidient Movement against the government. He referenced Obi's recent remarks in Berlin, Germany, where Obi alleged there had been an attempt on his life during a planned visit to Benue State back in April 2025. Bwala called it, in his exact words, palpable desperation. Three stories, one weekend, all pointing at the same movement that carried Peter Obi to 6.1 million votes in 2023. So today we are asking the question directly, is the Obidient Movement actually cracking from the inside, or is this a coordinated presidency strategy to make it look that way before 2027? Stay with me. If you are new to the Policy Pulse HQ, this channel gives you Nigerian political analysis that goes beyond the headlines. Subscribe now and stay with me, because untangling these three stories is going to change how you see the Obidient Movement heading into 2027. Why we need to untangle these three stories before analyzing them. Before we go further, I need to do something that most coverage of this weekend's news has not done properly. I need to separate these three stories clearly because they are being reported together in ways that blur what actually happened, when, and from whom. Thread 1 is Bwala's silent civil war claim posted on X on Friday, July 17. This is Bwala's own characterization of internal Obidient Movement dynamics. He offered no named sources, no specific individuals leaving the movement, and no verifiable data. It is, at this stage, an allegation from a presidency aide, not a confirmed internal Obidient Movement report. Thread 2 is the Isaac Fayose situation, which also surfaced on July 17. This one has actual documented substance behind it. A video genuinely exists showing Fayose praying with Seyi Tinubu. That video went viral. Fayose responded to the criticism he received by saying he retains the freedom to support any political candidate he chooses, and that his prior support for Obi should not be interpreted as a permanent commitment. Daily Post has since reported that Peter Obi personally called Fayose following the controversy, according to Fayose himself. Thread 3 is Bwala's newest allegation, published on July 18, that Obi is using repeated claims about threats to his life as a deliberate strategy to mobilize the Obidient Movement. This directly references Obi's July 8 podcast statement, which we covered in detail on this channel, where Obi said he may not survive to contest in 2027. Bwala is now framing that statement along with a separate Berlin remark about an alleged Benue assassination attempt in April 2025 and an airport confrontation as evidence of a deliberate pattern rather than genuine security concerns. Why treating these three threads as one story is misleading? Here is the analytical mistake that most Nigerian social media commentary is making right now. These three threads have three completely different evidentiary standards. Thread 1, the silent civil war claim, is pure assertion with zero named sources or verifiable data. Thread 2, the Fayose situation, is grounded in an actual video that genuinely exists and that Fayose himself has not denied. Thread 3, the strategy allegation, is Bwala's interpretation of Obi's own public statements, filtered through a specific political lens designed to discredit those statements rather than engage with their substance. Treating all three as equally weighted evidence of one unified obedient movement collapse is analytically dishonest, whether that dishonesty comes from presidency supporters amplifying every thread as proof of crisis, or from obedient movement supporters dismissing every thread as coordinated presidency propaganda. The honest approach is to weigh each thread on its own actual evidentiary merit, which is exactly what we are going to do for the rest of this video.
What Bwala actually said and what evidence he actually provided. Let us look directly at Bwala's silent civil war claim, because the language he used deserves careful attention. He wrote on X, quote, "There is a silent political civil war going on in the obedient camp. The realization that it is not a political movement, but a hate, vitriol, and unpatriotic movement. They hate the country they want to govern. You only need to hear them discrediting Nigeria, Nigerians, and Nigerian leaders. Their members are beginning to see through the lenses. They are abandoning the so-called movement." End quote. Notice what is present in that statement and what is absent. What is present is a strong, emotionally charged characterization of the obedient movement as fundamentally unpatriotic and driven by hatred rather than genuine political conviction. What is absent is any specific evidence, no named individuals who have left the movement, no membership numbers before and after, no internal obedient movement communications or leaked documents, no verifiable metric of any kind. This does not automatically mean Bwala's claim is false. Political movements built primarily around social media mobilization genuinely can experience internal fragmentation that is difficult to measure from the outside, precisely because such movements often lack the formal membership structures that would make such fragmentation easy to document. It is entirely possible that some obedient movement supporters are disengaging for reasons ranging from fatigue to disagreement on strategy to genuine disillusionment with specific tactics used by prominent movement voices online. But it is equally important to recognize what this claim represents strategically. Daniel Bwala is not a neutral observer. He is the special advisor on policy communication to the president that the obedient movement exists specifically to oppose. A claim of internal collapse without evidence by the communications advisor to your political opponent is precisely the kind of statement that requires the highest level of scrutiny before being treated as established fact, regardless of which side of Nigerian politics you personally support. What a genuine test of this claim would actually look like. Here is what would actually constitute credible evidence of an obedient movement internal crisis, as opposed to a presidency communications talking point. Verifiable social media engagement data showing declining activity across genuine obedient movement accounts and hashtags over a sustained period, not a single viral moment. Named individuals who were previously prominent and vocal within the movement publicly explaining specific reasons for their departure, similar to what we are actually seeing with the separate Isaac Fayose situation. Internal disagreements over strategy or leadership becoming public through verifiable statements from movement figures themselves rather than being asserted by an opposing political operative. None of that evidentiary standard has been met by Bwala's silent civil war claim as of this recording. That does not mean internal obedient movement tension does not exist. Every large political movement, including the ACP itself, experiences internal tension. It means the specific claim of a silent civil war, as currently presented, remains an assertion rather than a documented fact.
The one thread with real, verifiable substance behind it. Now, let us turn to the Fayose situation, because this is the one thread among the three that actually has documented, verifiable substance, and it deserves the deepest analysis in this video. Isaac Fayose is not a random social media figure. He is the younger brother of Ayodele Fayose, the controversial former governor of Ekiti State, who remains a significant figure in Nigerian opposition politics. Isaac Fayose had been publicly associated with support for Peter Obi. A video then surfaced showing him praying together with Seyi Tinubu, the president's son, generating significant criticism from Obidient Movement supporters online, who viewed it as a betrayal or, at minimum, a troubling signal of divided loyalty. Fayose's response was not to deny the video or apologize for it. Instead, he defended his right to engage across political lines, stating explicitly that his previous support for Obi should not be interpreted as a permanent commitment, and that he retains the freedom to support any political candidate of his choosing. He went further, expressing genuine admiration for both President Tinubu and Seyi Tinubu. Then came the detail that makes this story genuinely significant rather than just another social media controversy. According to Fayose himself, speaking to Daily Post, Peter Obi personally called him following the backlash from this viral video. That detail tells us something important. Whatever tension exists around Fayose's political positioning, Peter Obi himself considered the relationship significant enough to warrant a direct, personal phone call rather than simply allowing the situation to be handled by movement supporters online or ignoring it entirely. This is where the Fayose situation genuinely intersects with legitimate questions about Obidient Movement cohesion, not because it proves a civil war exists, but because it shows something more specific and more interesting. It shows that individual relationships within Obi's broader coalition of supporters are genuinely fluid, that public figures associated with the movement do maintain independent political relationships across party lines, and that maintaining coalition discipline within a movement built primarily on shared opposition to the current government rather than on formal party structure requires ongoing personal management, including direct personal phone calls from the presidential candidate himself. What the Fayose call actually reveals about Obi's political strategy. Here is the detail that deserves more attention than it has received. A presidential candidate personally calling one individual supporter, however politically connected that supporter's family name might be, is a significant investment of a candidate's personal time and political capital. Obi is currently managing a presidential campaign, a party registration legal battle with the NDC, allegations about his own safety, and the broader coordination of a national coalition. That he personally intervened in the Fayose situation tells us that Obi's team views individual relationship management, not just mass movement mobilization through social media, as strategically important to holding his coalition together. That is a genuinely useful insight into how the Obi campaign actually operates behind the scenes, separate from the public-facing Obidient Movement social media activity that Bwala's silent civil war claim focuses on entirely. The real coalition management appears to be happening through direct, personal, individual relationship maintenance, which is a very different picture from the purely online movement that Bwala is characterizing. Drop a comment right now. Do you think Isaac Fayose praying with Seyi Tinubu is a genuine political betrayal, or is he right that supporting a candidate once does not mean permanent loyalty forever? I want your honest view before we get to the most important part of this analysis.
Revisiting Obi's safety claims through Bwala's new framing. Now, let us address the third and most serious thread, Bwala's allegation published yesterday, July 18, that Obi is using repeated claims about threats to his life as a deliberate political strategy to mobilize the Obidient Movement. On this channel, we previously did a full, honest breakdown of Obi's July 8 podcast statement, where he said he might not be alive by 2027 due to what he described as deliberate government frustration of everything he does.
We took that statement seriously, examined it against Nigeria's documented history of suspicious deaths of opposition figures, and noted that the government's lack of a formal, visible security response to that specific claim was itself a significant data point worth watching. Bwala's new allegation adds two additional pieces of context that we did not have when we did that original analysis. First, he references Obi's remarks in Berlin, Germany, where Obi claimed there had been an attempt on his life during a planned visit to Benue State in April 2025, over a year before his July 8 podcast statement. Second, Bwala references what he describes as a separate airport incident, where he claims Obi falsely accused airport officials of threatening his life when Obi had, according to Bwala, actually violated airport traffic regulations himself. This is where honest analysis requires us to hold two things simultaneously. The first is that a pattern of multiple separate claims about threats to one's life spread across different contexts and different time periods does raise a legitimate analytical question about whether these claims form a coherent, verifiable pattern of genuine persecution, or whether they represent something closer to what Bwala is alleging, a recurring political messaging strategy. Why both possibilities remain genuinely open. Here is the second thing that must be held simultaneously, and it is equally important. Bwala's characterization of the airport incident, that Obi falsely accused officials after violating traffic rules himself, is Bwala's account, not an independently verified one. We do not have access to airport security footage, official incident reports, or independent witness testimony that would allow us to determine definitively whether Obi's account or Bwala's account of that specific incident is accurate. Similarly, the Benue assassination attempt claim from April 2025 has not been independently investigated or confirmed by any security agency, court, or independent journalist as far as verifiable public reporting shows. What we can say with confidence is this. Nigeria's political culture, particularly around opposition figures, has genuinely documented instances of both real persecution and politically strategic exaggeration existing simultaneously across different individuals and different eras. The existence of Nigeria's documented history of suspicious deaths of opposition figures, which we discussed at length in our previous video, does not automatically validate every individual claim of threat made by every opposition figure at every moment. Equally, the existence of political actors who genuinely do use safety claims strategically for mobilization does not mean every such claim from every figure is manufactured. Each specific claim requires its own independent verification, which in this case, for both the Benue incident and the airport incident, has not yet occurred through any independent verifiable process.
Separating presidency strategy from genuine movement weakness. Let us step back and think strategically about what all three of these threads mean for the Obidient Movement heading into the 2027 election, separate from whether each individual claim is fully verified. The presidency clearly has a strategic interest in portraying the Obidient Movement as internally fractured, hateful, and unpatriotic. If Nigerian voters, particularly undecided or moderate voters who are not deeply embedded in either political camp, come to view the Obidient Movement primarily through Bwala's framing as a hate-driven rather than policy-driven movement, that framing directly damages Peter Obi's broader electoral coalition beyond just his hardcore online supporter base. At the same time, the Obi campaign cannot simply dismiss every one of these threads as pure presidency propaganda without engaging with them substantively. The Fayose situation is documented and real. If similar situations emerge with other prominent supporters between now and 2027, and if Obi's team continues needing to manage them through personal, individual interventions like the reported phone call, that pattern itself could become a genuine vulnerability, not because it proves a civil war, but because it reveals that Obi's coalition may be held together more by individual relationship management than by deep structural political alignment. The threat to life claims occupy the most sensitive territory of all three.
If Obi's safety concerns are genuine, dismissing them as political strategy is not just analytically wrong, it is potentially dangerous, given Nigeria's documented history in this area. But if any specific claim is later shown to be inaccurate or exaggerated, that would create a credibility problem that could affect how seriously future, potentially genuine safety concerns are taken, both by the public and by security agencies who would need to respond to them. 5 signals for the weeks ahead. Here is exactly what to watch as these 3 threads continue developing over the coming weeks. The first signal is whether any other prominent Obidient Movement figures beyond Isaac Fayose publicly distance themselves from the movement or from Peter Obi specifically. A single individual defection, especially one connected to a politically complex family like the Fayoses, is not evidence of a broader trend. Multiple similar situations within a short period would be. The second signal is whether Peter Obi's team responds directly and specifically to Bwala's silent civil war claim with any verifiable data of their own, such as documented movement activity, membership engagement, or specific named supporters countering the narrative publicly. Silence on this specific claim versus a direct data-backed rebuttal will tell us something about how seriously the Obi campaign takes this particular attack line. The third signal is whether any independent verification emerges regarding either the April 2025 Benue incident or the airport incident that Bwala referenced. Independent journalism, security agency statements, or court proceedings that shed light on either incident would significantly change how we should weigh Bwala's strategy allegation against Obi's original safety claims. The fourth signal is whether the presidency's broader communication strategy continues emphasizing the Obidient Movement's alleged internal weaknesses as a consistent talking point in the weeks ahead, or whether this was a one-off weekend messaging moment. A sustained, repeated communications campaign around this theme would suggest a deliberate, coordinated presidency strategy rather than an isolated statement from one aide. The fifth signal is voter sentiment itself. Watch for any credible, methodologically sound polling that emerges between now and the 2027 election, specifically measuring Obidient Movement engagement and Peter Obi's broader coalition support. Ultimately, whether this weekend's 3 stories represent genuine movement weakness or effective presidency messaging will be answered not by competing ex-posts, but by what actually happens at the ballot box. Here is where these 3 threads leave us. Bwala's silent civil war claim remains an unverified assertion from a politically interested source. The Isaac Fayose situation is documented and real, and it reveals that Obi's coalition requires active, personal management to hold together. And the threat to life strategy allegation remains genuinely unresolved, sitting at the uncomfortable intersection of Nigeria's real history of political violence and the real possibility of strategic political messaging. None of these 3 threads, individually or combined, proves that the Obidient Movement is collapsing. None of them proves that it is not experiencing real internal strain either. What they prove together is that Peter Obi's coalition heading into 2027 is being tested from multiple directions simultaneously, by a presidency communication strategy actively working to undermine it, by the genuine complexity of holding together a broad, loosely structured political movement, and by unresolved questions about his own safety that deserve more honest scrutiny than either side of Nigerian politics is currently giving them. Nigeria deserves better than propaganda from either side. It deserves verified facts. And right now, on all 3 of these threads, the facts remain genuinely incomplete. If this analysis helped you separate fact from political messaging in this weekend's Obidient Movement stories, share it with one Nigerian who needs to see it. Like this video, subscribe to the Policy Pulse HQ, and tell me in the comments, do you think the Obidient Movement is genuinely fracturing, or is this a presidency messaging strategy? I will see you in the next one.